Do you tend to build box factories like this? Well, you're not alone, and this video is going to be perfect for you. Box factories may get the job done, but just don't look the part. And frequently people join my streams over on twitch.tv/Totalxclipse if you want to join me, asking about how to improve the look of plain factories. So today I'm going to show you the steps it takes to go from this to something like this. And believe it or not, it's a very simple build, and we'll use it as the starting blocks for you to design your own factories. Here you can see we have the basic wall. It's quick and easy to set up, but it's incredibly plain. So the first step is to make it pop by giving it a little bit of depth. Now you can easily do this by adding foundations around the outside. This gives us a primary and secondary depth to play around with, but it also gives it a different texture. It's a simple step that will uplift any build, and we can take this further by adding different foundation shapes to create varieties, such as ramps running along the opposite corners like you can see here, and we'll play around with it a little bit later on as well. Now, speaking of textures, though wall pieces work perfectly well, you can use different textured walls, or depending on the build, you may want to use foundations, as there are different materials to play around with, which can give a particular aesthetic that you may be going for, such as the coated foundations to add shine, or asphalt to give the two different depths more contrast. Now for this build, I'll just use the half foundations along with different walls in the next step. I should mention there's no right way to build in Satisfactory, and having huge hulking walls can look great, but with Lumen enabled, it can lead to very dark factories, which means you'll have to use a lot of lights in order to light them up. But that doesn't have to be the case. We can add windows which add natural lighting to the inside of your factory, and it also adds an extra layer of detail. So here we're adding the window pane in the center, then we're going to have the foundations either side. Now you may have noticed we're using a small 5 foundation wide build as an example here. This compartmentalizing wasn't actually intentional, I should mention, but this is actually really beneficial because it can be turned into a 4 foundation wide repeating blueprint. And for larger builds, this is going to be great at allowing you to quickly copy and paste segments of your factory together. So we'll do that with this at the end of the video once we've finalized the design so that we can copy and paste it. Now the next step is about layering the build. What you'll notice here is that every time I'm happy with a design, I'll start to add another layer to it. Now we're looking at 3 main elements in these builds. The first one is coherence. We want the build to flow together and not look out of place with the overall design. Secondly, we want to break up the shape using depth and angles before then playing around with details through material selection and lighting. Now here I've broken up the shape a little more with the upside down ramps creating a gentle arch. I've also added 2 sets of metal pillars with a small gap between them. Doing this adds more depth to the build, allowing more shadows for contrast, and the use of metal pillars gives a subtle difference to the material without breaking the flow of the build itself. The point of this step-by-step system is to show you, firstly, my approach to the builds, and how, secondly, you can repeat this step by step and then play around with augmenting your own ideas into your builds quite easily. It doesn't have to be daunting. I'm known for avoiding color in my live streams. At this point, it's a running meme that the majority of my factories are either gray or white, but that doesn't mean that you should avoid color. And it's something that I'm slowly warming to doing in my factory. So here I've added beams in front of the metal pillars. This again layers more depth into the build, but also gives us the perfect opportunity to play about with color. Now I've chosen a dark blue, which I feel works really well with the different gray tones that we have, and I could add more color, but I often feel that less is more. as it's easy to go over the top by adding lots of colors to your builds. Now, if you're new to using colors, do check out guides on color theory. It'll give you a much deeper understanding of how to use color in your factories, and it can hugely impact the look of your builds. On the subject of lighting is a great way to either highlight elements of the build or alternatively add contrast to your designs. I'll probably talk about using lighting to highlight parts of your build in a later video, so do subscribe if you're enjoying this and finding it helpful. However, when it comes to contrast, note how I've used signs to bring in a few more colors. I've also chosen two lights that are pretty much opposite ends of the color wheel spectrum, which makes them work really well together. Now, by the way, I am using signs for lighting here rather than the lights. If you want to know how we do this, just select the sign, remove any background or text, then set the light emission to 3 and select a background color to create this lighting effect. I've also added some more concrete pillars this time at an angle by placing them on the end of a beam that's being placed diagonally. This helps break up the shape further, and the beam connectors just add a touch more detail. Step 7 is all about the finishing touches. You can see I've used glossy black signs to add a whole different texture to the build. I've also added a top section that, despite using different materials, flows similarly to the section below. You can also see the diagonal pillars, the use of textures to connect two parts, such as the black signs here and below. Orange lighting is also used, and then we have the concrete pillars, which make it feel like a complete section. To get the diagonal signs and pillars, I've once again placed a beam diagonally and then placed the sign or the pillar directly onto them. Now, I've used a metal angular wall inside the pillars to add more detail, and I've used painted walls to blend the sections together. If you are creating this as a blueprint, you'll need to create the first strut as its own independent blueprint, and then you can do the rest of the section as its own dedicated blueprint as well. So it'll be two blueprints that you can sandwich together. I'll also include this blueprint on my Patreon page if you're wanting to save yourself time building it and want to support the channel as well. The link to that will be in the description below. The great thing about creating a wall system like this is that it helps you create a decorational asset pack for your builds. With a wall and a strut blueprint, you can now adjust the build to create a doorway, such as I've done here by adding larger pillars and lighting along with the doorway, and then used a beam to break up the window texture that's directly above the door. All you need after a door asset is a roof and corner piece, and then you can easily repeat this build system faster than building a normal box factory. And you don't have to stick with this asset for all of your factories. You can have an asset pack for each factory that you're designing. But guys, I hope you found this video helpful. If so, hit the thumbs up and let me know if you'd like to see me create other guides on decorational pieces like this in the future. And if you're wondering what to watch next, why not check out this video on building tips. Now, special thanks does go to all of our amazing supporters on Patreon who allow me to create this content, most notably our Solar Eclipse Patreon, Firefless, as well as our Lunars, the Calamity, Ben and Star, and our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Jenny. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.